And welcome to Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Larry and Spencer, and we're going to be discussing episode number 5 of The Wheel of Time, titled Blood Calls Blood. If you've not hit the sub button, please do so. Hit the like, which doesn't really matter anymore because they took away the downvote button, which I thought was an interesting choice, but okay. Leave a comment, and all right, let's start with we'll start with what was the main part of this episode, what sort of ran through with the bulk of the episode, and that was the character Steppen. He was a ward to an Aes Sedai who fell in battle, and so we basically get the whole journey of what happens when an Aes Sedai dies, what happens to the ward, the ceremonial aspect of the burial, the melting of the ring. Um, and what happens to that ward. And I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. Like I've been saying for all these episodes, I really enjoy, it feels like a nice bowl of just lore and you're just scooping it up and I enjoy that. But I do question why they spent so much time with this particular storyline in this episode. My guess is because they really just wanted to establish what a ward's role is. And then because we're going to get into the politics of the Aes Sedai going forward. And so they wanted to really hit home, hey, this is how shit works. And so when characters do certain things, you'll understand why. So that's my guess as to why they did it. But did you guys feel there was too much of it, or did you it didn't bother you, or how'd you feel about Steppen's storyline?
It didn't bother me at all. I think that the way they're setting it up is, two of the main characters, Lan and Moiraine, you understand that they're together, that they're, connected, that they kind of can feel each other's emotions. They can kind of sense what each other are feeling and the, how deeply it runs, but we never really understood how drastic that connection was. And then when you saw it Steppen, when his, Aes Sedai perished, he, got severely depressed and he got to the point where he didn't want to live on this earth without her anymore. And it's not that, a spouse losing his wife or anything. Like, their connection seemed even more, it was deeper than just a love kind of thing. It was their souls were almost bound together, which I think they make the reference that they are, bound.
Yeah.
So out his other half of his soul, like, he didn't want to be on this plane of existence anymore. And I think that they're driving home those kind of storylines because when you have Lambian, Moraine's warder, I think that they're trying to let you know if anything happened to either one of them, the other one would be severely stricken. So I think by doing this storyline, they're trying to strengthen Lan and Moraine's story, is what I felt watching it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That may be what they're trying to do. And like you said, Brian, we're going into this politics, and I guess we really did need more of a definition of what the role of ward was, because we know that the Aes Sedai, that they're like sorceresses, but it's like, okay, well, what is the role of the ward in this whole situation? Like, and it does sort of like add more significance to any event where something may happen to Lan or the person whose name I can't remember who he's the ward of.
Moiraine.
Moiraine, there we go. It adds significance to that. So like if Lan dies or Moiraine dies, you now have a better idea of how much of a loss it is.
We also, through this storyline, we get a little bit of we know that there are different sort of groups within the Aes Sedai, and they're represented by a color, and they have different roles as far as what they do. And we now know, they've been sort of pushing the Reds as somewhat antagonistic, an antagonistic group. But we also have learned that they don't have wards. That's something they're the one group that doesn't like it, And then we even have sort of a conversation about, their views on men and yet again, this is all important stuff going forward. And, so I was like, okay, they're really setting all this stuff up so that as things unfold later, you'll be like, okay, now I understand why it's happening. My biggest, not, I'll say complaint. the episode ends on a very emotional scene where they're burying Steppen because, or having a little ceremony for Steppen because he did take his own life. Um, but that's how they ended the episode. But I think you're right, Spencer. The whole point of that was to show the bond between Lan and Moiraine. And that was the reason, because usually when you end an episode, you really want it to hook the audience to watch next week. And so I didn't necessarily think that was the best moment to end the episode on. But thinking of it from that point of view, where we see his emotional feeling and seeing her, tear up and sort of saying, yes, these two are bonded. They're essentially one, and that's what they want you to take away from the episode.
I also like that sequence that's what kind of drove that point home to me. But the whole him standing beside him and the chest beating thing, one, it felt very, because I played rugby for 10 years. It was the haka, the Māori like war dance and stuff, and but that scene, because it's a fantasy show and everything else, it reminded me of the scene where everybody comes in and sees Frodo, and they're all like super excited. It was like the antithesis of that, like the opposite, because it was just an odd focus, like the way they were showing the face, and they concentrated on Lan. It felt, I think what they should have done is made that the beginning of an episode. I think they could have, tied up this episode with kind of talking about Nynaeve or Nynaeve. I don't know how to say it, but they have that character and how she's questioning whether or not she's going to be in it. And then you have Egwene and Perrin escape. Like, you should have ended it with something like that, or them meeting up, and then they could have started next week's episode with this to kind of get the emotional ball rolling. But I felt like this was an important scene to kind of drive that connection home. But I don't feel like it was, like you said, the best way to end the episode, because it wasn't comical, but it was close. And I know that that's not what they were going for, but I was giggling. I was like, what the fuck are they doing?
But yeah, and like you mentioned, they touched on the politics a bit, but I have a feeling, like, for the series as a whole, that their politics are likely very important to the series. And even though, to me, at least so far as a viewer, it doesn't really fit, maybe that's where a lot of people make that Game of Thrones connection, because you hear that associated with the show so much, at least in the media and with articles and things, like, oh, this is Bezos's Game of Thrones, and I haven't seen it so far, so maybe there's a fair amount of politics, and that's what people mean about that, involved in the tower and everything. And it's going to come from this organization and the different varieties of Aes Sedai, which, I guess I'll better look up what the role of, my plan is to better look up what the role of each one is, because I know we're getting it trickled in, but, I'm still curious about a lot of that.
So you look anything up, you're going to find out who lives, who dies, what new characters come in.
I'm really trying not to. I'm trying to avoid all that, but I'm very curious. And that's a good point. I may want to wait, because
you might want to just hold off.
Yeah, there's a lot of political things because I'm curious about, who's in charge, because they briefly mentioned someone being in charge, and we got a name, but we didn't give like a position, or whether she falls into one of those categories, where they're ranked by color, or is she simply above all of it?
Yeah, a lot of that I think is coming really soon. I think a lot of that will definitely be this season. We get a little bit, like you were saying with Nynaeve, as far as they want her, when they discover a new channeler and they feel like there's something special about them, they're like, all right, every group is sort of bidding for them to be part of the crew. Now she's sort of approaching it where she's like, I don't necessarily know if I want to be a part of all this shit. And they're basically like, yeah, that's probably not going to be so much of an option. Like, that's sort of the vibe they're giving off. Like, no, that's not how this works. So we're getting a little bit of that. She is reunited with Mat and Rand later. So that happens. But any thoughts on her storyline? It was there, but there wasn't a whole lot going on. Sort of her exploring and sort of being the POV character of the tower.
You said Nynaeve, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that's what you said, but then like I heard a noise and got sidetracked. I think that with her, what they're trying to do is show that not only is she super powerful because when she was able to basically suck in the one source and heal everyone in a matter of a moment, I think that her being able to do that was showing how powerful she is, and her getting what she was expressing is that she doesn't want to be a part of their political game. She doesn't want to be a part of any of that, but and it's mentioned in a lot of superhero comic books, and it's actually mentioned in Harry Potter. There's a lot of references to the people who are best suited for powers are the ones who don't seek it, but it's like kind of forced upon them. And I think that Nynaeve's role is that she may become, one of the most powerful, but being in charge may be something that pulls the Aes Sedai together, as opposed to right now where they seem to be divided and they each have their own faction and their own beliefs and stuff, as opposed to kind of being under one umbrella. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to believe the same thing, but have the same goals. And right now it doesn't seem like they do. So I think that the reason they're focusing on her is because of that. Like she may be going forward somebody who's got more clout than what we're showing right now.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That's exactly where I think they're taking her, that eventually she may, in fact, be in charge of the Aes Sedai. And, there's a chance, I think, even like, and I can't remember this character's name because we don't see her as much, the more antagonistic one, the red Aes Sedai, the primary red one that we see.
Yeah, I can't remember her name either.
Well, she may be right about Nynaeve that she's going to maybe plead red, and she may do that, but she may like reform what they are even in the tower. So I'm curious which one she does choose, and I'm curious I'm sure given her as a character, we're gonna explore the other factions through her because there's the same level of she knows about it as much about them as we do as the viewer. So she'll be our into that, but I think that she's gonna go with red.
I think it's Liandrin, like
Liandrin.
I think something like that.
Like, yeah, I think Liandrin's right, but I don't think that her goals are the same as Liandrin's goals.
No.
Like I said, she's reunited with Matt and Rand. They don't do a whole lot. It reminded me a little of Harry Potter, actually, sort of Rand in this episode, because it was, him discovering a place, this magical place he's never seen, and he's in this bookstore, and this like ogre, this ogre dude comes in. He's like, "What are you?" And he freaks out, and his name's Loyal, by the way. And I don't know, it really reminded me of Harry Potter, but not much happens outside of sort of doubling down on Matt. Clearly something is wrong with Matt. And they're trying to figure that out, but like I said, we're introduced to Loyal, and hint hint, he is an important character going forward, so you will see a lot more of him.
All good.
Like, yeah, he seems like an interesting character, and that's the thing, like, they seem to, like, at points where they seem to be ignoring him or not paying attention to him, he seems to do very pivotal things, like he took Nynaeve from the tower and brought her back to the inn and everything. And I imagine he'll play little roles like that, or or at the very least he's that character that his lesson is to them to slow down and actually think about shit instead of actually running in head first or panicking like they've done so often here. But like you said, something is clearly wrong with Matt, and perhaps even he'll be the one to figure it out, that it's not so much Matt that's the problem, it's the dagger that he has.
Well, and for him to be, and we talked about it before, I don't remember if it was on or off air, about how he's a fan favorite. And I'm on chapter 14 or 15 of the book now. I listened to the audio version with Rosalind Pike, the lady who plays Moraine, reading it, and she does a really good job. But they
how much money are you getting from Audible?
I mean, they're listening. But they dude, because right now I'm driving, about an hour in the morning, about an hour and a half at night to go to work, and that's my jam, dude. 2.5 hours, it keeps me focused on not being stuck in traffic. But they, Matt's character through the first part of that book, which kind of where I'm at now is they're still camping out at night or whatever, trying to get off the road. They just went across the ferry. But you have so much going on with Matt, but he's like this jokester, prankster. So for him to completely change and for, the kids to die and everything, which we talked about it, we don't think that it's him. But it's one of those things where his complete character has changed since he's gotten that knife. So I am curious to see what it's going to take for him to realize that it's that, or for someone else to realize that it's something off. I am curious to see how he shifts or what happens to make him shift. Like, I don't know if he's going to end up hurting somebody or threatening to hurt somebody or cut somebody with that knife. And Moraine's like, where the fuck did you get that? Like, I am very curious as to how his character shifts.
Yeah, I'm curious about that myself, and it's an interesting type of change, the way that it's corrupting him in a way. Because often in media, you see the person like hear voices or the items whispering to, whereas this just seems to be outright changing his personality and just kind of and making him act against who the core of who the character seems to be. So I imagine, like you said, it could be Moraine, it could be the Ogier that just kind of just through that quiet perception that he seems to be like his main character trait. He notices that's like, that's not this guy. That's the thing he's got,
Yeah. We got the scene with them parading the false dragon through the streets, and Matt seeing a lot of crazy shit with that. Yeah, not a whole lot with Rand and Matt outside of the. Here's a question: the way they edited the scene, I forget the scene, but when Loial brought Nynaeve to him, I thought that was the weirdest edit. It's just like, oh, she's there, and then it's like, oh, hey guys. Now, I'm not saying they needed to necessarily show him find her and all that, but to me, it was. I laughed a little bit. I was like, well, okay. Like, it was like they were sitting there and they're like, we just need. Yeah, she finds him at this point.
Yeah, it felt like there's a scene.
It felt like a scene was missing. Yeah.
And I think too, when you go back to how big these books are and how many books there are, it's one of those things where there's probably a couple things written to get to that point, but they're like, this does not progress the plot. This doesn't really matter. Let's just throw this shit in here to wrap that chapter up so that that way it just happens. But when you talk about Logain seeing Matt and Rand, the smile on his face, like, it seems as though he's not in touch with the One Source anymore. Like, he doesn't have the power anymore, but it's like he can still sense maybe whatever the dark side is. I don't want to say dark side because that's Star Wars reference, but whatever the
I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, the
dark one,
corrupted or corruption or
So
like
So I think he can sense it in Matt because he looked up at him and smiled. So whatever his touch is with that source, it's still there. He just doesn't have the big source of power right now. So I am curious as to what that is implying and what that means.
What I think was the most interesting portion of the episode. Let's jump into Egwene and Perrin. I might sound like an asshole, and I am, but when they did the human chain and they started beating the shit out of them, I laughed so hard. I was like, how did you guys think this was gonna go? But basically they're with the Tinkers, and they're making their way to the city and doing their thing, and all of a sudden the Children of the Light, their crew rolls in, and Valda is with them, the questioner, and basically he sees Perrin and Egwene, and he's like, hey, I need to talk to them, and they're like, no, screw you. And so they form this human chain because they are pacifists. They will not fight. They will either run or stand their ground. And he sort of like looks at them and he's like, I guess we're gonna do this. And he just gives an order to his guys, yeah, go. And they just beat the shit out of them. And I was impressed that they didn't hold back in that. Like, they beat the shit out of them. And Egwene and Perrin get captured. And so then we go into a sequence of torture because he's basically telling Egwene, you must show me that you can channel. I know you can. And he basically says, either you channel, I kill you, or I'm going to kill Perrin. And then we end up with her little fireball, which yet again I laughed. But she frees Perrin, and we see his eyes change. And a pack of wolves come and just fucking annihilate the Children of the Light, and they're able to escape. We can talk about all those parts, but that's basically what happened. Most interesting thing, I agree. That's how I would have ended the episode, with that escape sequence. But yeah, how did y'all feel about that whole journey and from beginning to end?
I think as far as story goes, like their storyline is the most interesting. I don't know that it's the most important, but when we look at Rand, I think his storyline, just because how they focus on him from the beginning, in the book they focus on him a lot. So I think that he's kind of our POV, but it's one of those things where you include all the other characters because they're all very important. So I think that
Perrin's becoming my most favorite.
Yeah, mine too. That's what
of the show. Yeah.
Their story to me is the most interesting so far. And I understand that what they're trying to do with the other characters is, building this story, building this kind of lore and this world. But with their story, we said it last week that I felt like, God, I hope they do something with them. And then this episode starts with them doing something with them. So my gripe from last week, well, it immediately went away when this episode started. I was like, well, shit, there they go. And it was great to see that, because that was legit my only gripe from last week. I was, saying that I don't feel like their story has been important. They don't, and then immediately it becomes important again. And Perrin's power, like it feels like a druid kind of thing. So when we compare stuff to D&D, that's what it feels like. Shapeshifter, druid, any of those things, but him being able to call on that and do that, and how smart Egwene is, and even though she doesn't necessarily know how to control her power or what she's doing yet, it's kind of being that untaught. So I'm curious as to where her story goes from here, because she hasn't been learning. She's been learning a little bit from Nynaeve, but it's what she's doing now is completely different. It's more of a, like with the fire and everything else, feels more like she may end up with the Red Aes Sedai as opposed to Nynaeve, because now you look what she just experienced with the Questioner. These men are crucifying these women. These men are battling these, and Nynaeve didn't go through that, but Egwene did. So I am curious if she kind of goes that route as opposed to Nynaeve.
And that's a good point, because if they're both there at the tower, the Aes Sedai are going to want to recruit them both. So that's a pretty good chance, and likely that's going to cause some drama, because whichever way either of them go, I feel like they're going to pick opposing factions, and that'll cause personal issues with them.
I agree.
Like as far as the Perrin thing, like you said, that also brings up something that I'm curious about with Perrin, which is like we've seen potential mentor characters, I think, for all of these characters so far, with the exception of Perrin. So when he's over his personal quest to sort of figure out, I guess, who he is and where he stands on things, like when are we going to see that mentor character for him? Like, in what form does it come? Because we've seen nobody else exhibit the kind of powers he has, and I feel like what he's doing is very different than what we're seeing everybody else do. It just seems different because they seem to channel in a different way. You see the tendrils come out and everything, whereas he himself seems to change, and also he summons wolves and things, and that doesn't seem to be a way that you see any other character use the one power. So, like, how is he going to learn to control this? Is he on his own, or is there a mentor character that's also out there for him?
I have a feeling about that. The character
I know the answer, so I'm not going to say.
Oh,
but go ahead.
I felt like go McGruff, get your face out my face. I think just by looking at it, you have I don't remember the librarian's name, the ogre guy or
Loyal.
Like I think that he may end up being Perrin's kind of guide. And the only reason I think that is for him to be what he is and being as calm. And the reference of, all humans are they're always in a hurry. They never think things through and that kind of stuff, is that I think from experience, he had to learn how to control that shit. And Perrin is having a hard time controlling it and, keeping it kind of not under wraps, but keeping it under control. And I think that may be the person to show him. And he's also, in a library, super smart. So those kind of things, I don't think that necessarily has to be somebody with dramatic powers or whatever, but I think that he may be the one that helps him.
That's a good point, because we mentioned that before, that he's like a person who's more patient and perceptive about things, and you didn't even think about that. That's kind of the lesson that Perrin kind of needs to learn with these wolves, to sit back and think things through and kind of, and to control it a bit. And also, like you mentioned, he's sort of a librarian and everything, and he's always reading a book or always has books around. Maybe he's read up on this to some degree, like the type of power that Perrin has.
Yeah, the show's done a great job of introducing characters and story elements, and we're 5 episodes in, we're halfway to the end, and I think it's funny because it's building up so much and introducing so much, you have that almost overwhelming sense of there's not enough time to finish this, and it's like, no, it's not going to be anywhere close to finished at the end of the season. And so, yeah, everything, it almost feels like just an epic prologue, because in some ways that's exactly what this season is. And,
yeah, I think that it's crazy. Like you said, it's just a giant prologue. It's a lot of other shows, video games, everything does that, where it's basically giving you the world building so that going forward, you know what to expect. And I think that this show's doing a great job of that. I'm trying to think of, there's several other shows that have done that. You look at even Game of Thrones, the way that they set up the world, the way that they set up everything in the first season, I think that they did it a little bit more at a breakneck speed, which is what kind of crossed over with other audiences and stuff, where this one's more lore heavy as opposed to politic heavy, which I think it'll get into that. But the Game of Thrones got politic heavy really quick. There's a bunch of people conspiring to do things against other people. They focus more on those aspects of it, whereas this is focusing more on the lore and the one source and that stuff. So I think that they're just focusing on different stuff early on, which, I mean, with Bezos, and we've joked about it before, where we think that Bezos just is a really big nerd, and this show will probably continue regardless of what the ratings are. But I think that they're just taking a different approach, and I don't dislike it, but I think that it's going to hurt them until they get a couple seasons in. And I think once they get a couple seasons in, people will go back and kind of binge watch it and stuff. But right now, I think that it's going to hurt the numbers a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like season 2 will move much faster, and that like you said, that this is more of a okay, here's the world. Okay, now you're in it. Now you understand the rules of this world. It's like, now we can move forward at a steadier pace, and maybe because it seems to be doing well from what we know so far, maybe we can get more episodes of that next season as well. But like you said, this definitely feels like a build up to what the series will be more than anything.
Yeah, and that's yeah, that's completely accurate, because it really, and as like I said, I know I've read the first book. I know other lore things, but as far as the story, but I don't know anything about the last like 5 or 6 books, like nothing at all. And I've heard from like hardcore. I actually know someone who's read all the books, and they said that the series truly doesn't start until book 3.
Oh,
Like
wow.
that's sort of the thought is, yeah, the books, it doesn't really start until book 3. And this literally is. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we've talked about it before, where they're introducing parts of book 2 and 3 into this series. the initial first 10 episodes or whatever. And I think that's why, is that they want to, get people hooked early enough to where it's not just continuing, I don't want to say boredom, but continuing the lore building, which you have the ability to do that in books a little bit more than you can in a TV show that costs millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, because it's not necessarily like any of us are bored, but I do find myself, especially after this episode, hoping that every episode from here on out is 2 hours, which is not something I want for most shows, but I do want more of this world. And and the pace, at least for me, the pace that they're doing it at, is fine, because I'm very, just kind of invested in this in this genre if you do it well. But it's like, okay, well, this is fine, but I do want more. I do want more than like 10 episodes or whatever from this.
Yeah, this is epic fantasy done as a slow burn. And like I said, we're just sort of establishing who's important and what the characters are. And, it's going to be interesting going forward. Like I said, I hope they just go ahead and say, screw it. We'll greenlight 5 seasons or whatever and go from there. But then it becomes a question of how long does it take to make these seasons? I think this season took a long ass time to shoot, if I'm not mistaken, like very long time. So I am curious about season 2.
But I think that just like if you know what the plan is, so like if they already, like, we don't know it yet, but what if they've already been promised at least this many seasons, then they may have shot scenes from seasons going forward. Because if they wanted to film parts in the White Tower, or if they need to film parts over here, you just kind of, just from a directorial standpoint, you look at it that way, where it's cheaper to shoot a lot of those scenes, even if you have to shoot going into the further seasons, because they almost have to look at it like not like a sitcom where it's the characters just come to work, read the script, and do their 20-minute episode. They film for 3 or 4 days and knock out an episode. This is almost like movie style, where they're filming for multiple weeks in different locations and stuff. So I think that it would be easier to film multiple seasons at one time, and they may have a little bit, but I don't know.
The smartest thing they did as far as production is they aged up the characters. Like, these characters are a lot younger in the books when it starts. And they aged them up, therefore you hire older actors and you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to worry about like, oh shit, they're gonna look way older when we get
because the entire book series, which I didn't know, I looked it up, takes place over like I think 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's years.
Yeah, so like the 14 books take place over only like 2 or 3 years. So if you imagine, even if they do 7 seasons, the kids can't look 13, 14 anymore, because
exactly
they're like 24 at this point. Like, it's
it's similar to what they did with Game of Thrones. Although I think a lot of the aging up was more so for the all the certain scenes they had to do.
Yeah,
right.
The only one they knew they had to keep young was Arya.
Well, yeah, and I get what you're saying about this too, because like Spencer's saying, if this spans years, and like we know there are a ton of books for this series, you can't have Perrin, look 12 years old at the beginning of this, and then you come back for season 2 and he looks like he's 17.
Yeah. So yeah, aging up completely made sense. That's sort of, it's interesting. That's become the thing. Like in fantasy, typically it's sort of the hero's journey of a young, character growing up, and that's the journey. And when it comes to translating it to film or television, they're like, yeah, we can't do that. They're going to be 17 or 18 or 21, and that's just what it's been.
And I think too, you have to look at it from a story standpoint, whereas in fantasy, they set it back in medieval time frame. So there's a king, you look at like King Louis was 14, I think, when he became king, 13, 14, and he was married to some 12-year-old from another country, and they're trying to have babies and stuff like that. It's not uncommon, because their lifespan wasn't 80 years. Their life expectancy was much shorter. So when they try to write fantasy, they write it similar to what a medieval kind of time frame would be, And when you're talking about all these awful things happening to a 13-year-old girl or this 14-year-old boy who's tricked into doing all these awful things, it's like you can't portray that on film with actors and not have people, get an uproar. So I think that logistically speaking, it is the best thing for them to do to prevent an outcry as far as viewership.
They could shoot it in France. They don't give a shit. um,
What's the one with what's her face? Brooke Shields?
yeah,
Like,
then where was that? Was American though, was it?
Yeah, but it wasn't filmed here.
Yeah, that
it was like,
yeah,
that was one of those sketchy like Polanski thing.
Yeah.
But I think that, that one of my coworkers at my new job, he has like original pressings of the book and shit. And he brought one in. I was like, God damn, like all the pages were brown and shit. It was, the book's 30 something years old. But he was telling me he watched the first episode and he didn't like it. He was, saying that, certain characters didn't look like they did in the book. So like his was from a true fanboy perspective. Like he loves the books. He reads them over and over and over again. And he gets frustrated because he sees what the show did and he doesn't agree. So that is to me the biggest, not concern necessarily, because I was reading the Game of Thrones books and watching the show.
But it is a concern in that if the hardcore readers don't support the show, but the show also doesn't appeal to a mass or a bigger audience, that's like I said, Game of Thrones appealed to a mass audience, people that didn't even give a shit about fantasy. I don't know that this show is doing that.
Yeah, and it's worrisome just because I want them to finish. I love it. I love the high fan. Like I have zero issue with what they're doing, and even because I look at it from a filmmaker's perspective, where I didn't like the Harry Potter movies as much, but Harry being
there's like two good ones, in my opinion. I know that's controversial, but
you make Harry the main character, and he's different in the books than he is.
Completely different character.
So it's one of those things where it's not that they had other characters do certain things. Like this is a Harry Potter spoiler, so just skip ahead 10 seconds if you don't want to hear it.
I will.
Well, it's not really a spoiler, but in the Triwizard tournament, it's not Neville that gives the help throughout this stuff. It's Dobby, but they didn't want to CG Dobby in, so they just gave.
But they cut all the fucking Dobby and all that shit got cut out.
Great part of the books, but it wasn't vital. So this show does a similar kind of thing where, because like you said previously, it's 2,000 some odd named characters. If they just make like those 5 characters that come in and give them to somebody else and make them, hand them a book or tell them about this scroll that they need to find. Like, that to me is not what ruined the Harry Potter movies. That wouldn't ruin this show for me either. Like if they kind of combine some characters or do some of those kind of things. To me, it's about the character's journey and the character's kind of reasons for existing, and what drives them needs to be the same.
Speaking of that though, I am very curious, and Brian, I think you're more familiar with the books than any of us. Like, was it an important thing? Because they seem to be hinting that it is in the books that Rand has red hair.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because like I noticed, like there were hints with the dead warrior that they found a few episodes ago and everything, and he's describing this veiled warrior and everything. The bard that the Gleeman that helped out Rand and Matt and everything, and he mentioned that guy had his red hair too, and now the Ogier mentions it, so imagine that there's a group of warriors that we're going to encounter of some kind. I'm curious how that's going to play out.
When they were doing the casting, there was a lot of conversation about were they going to change certain aspects, but when they cast Rand, they're like, oh yeah, that sort of looks like the book, and there's a reason, and I'll leave it at that. But my only gripe with Rand's casting, that guy needs to bulk up. I'm sorry, but he's too small.
Well, I know what you mean. Like he doesn't look strong. He doesn't look strong.
Exactly. And it's like, come on, dude. You put on a little mass. But
It's like,
besides that, he's been doing fine. Everybody's been doing good in their role.
Yeah, it does
like I
make
said-
it a little bit less believable when Rand's like busting through doors and
exactly. It
power
bugs
bombing
me a little
people
bit.
when he looks like 5'8", 125 pounds.
like yeah, because it's like
Yeah.
he exhibited that super strength, and yeah, that's the one power. But also, he's this country boy that lives in the backwoods, and has to do all these. You can't tell me that you'd wind up looking that scrawny and kind of weak. That's Rand looks like he's trying to watch his figure a little too much for this series. Is all I'm saying. I 100% agree with you that I'm like this character should be at least what I'm imagining a little bulkier.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and he's obviously gonna sword fight and stuff later too.
Well, yeah. Here I'm looking at his exact. I just looked up his physical description, and yeah, 6'6", muscular. Like
that part I knew that he was supposed to be like 6'6".
Yes, he's supposed to be a big fucking dude, and he's supposed to be this is that's what I'm saying. I was like,
And
yeah,
And it's funny because I looked it up too. Perrin's supposed to be not short. He's like 6 foot, but he's basically built like Brock Lesnar, which they do a decent job with this. They make Perrin look huge, but for Rand to be like the towering giant that's supposed to be this, even make Perrin look a little smaller.
Here it is, and I'll only read the parts that aren't spoiler. Male, 6'6", muscular build, 235 pounds,
No
dark
way.
red hair. That's supposed to be Rand al'Thor.
If you told me he was 150 pounds, I'd believe it. But I'm not crapping on scrawny people because I'm scrawny. It's just like that's not what you imagine for the character is the thing.
Yeah, no, it was one of those where, like I said, they got the red hair and all, they got all that, and I was like, okay, cool, but then I was like, it's a small dude.
Yeah.
But okay, whatever.
Like
he definitely didn't go to the Marvel school of training where every guy they hired, they're like, all right, now you got to train for 6 months, and
like yeah,
should have met up with Chris Hemsworth for a couple weeks.
Dude, that guy, you saw the new pics for Thor. I mean, he got so damn ripped.
That's because of Hulk, though, because he's also filming that Hulk Hogan biopic. So
that's right. Yeah.
So he's bigger now, but it wasn't for Thor. It was for Hulk Hogan. They just filmed Thor first. So
he's shooting that Netflix movie.
Yeah, was it not Extension?
Extraction.
There you go.
Yeah, the sequel.
The first one was good.
Yeah. So, all right. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the casting of Rand.
Yeah, he needs to go to that Henry Cavill School of Acting right there.
Shit, I don't know if that's possible. Yeah. That's the greatest shit ever. The Witcher. Like me and Larry laugh because we're fans of the franchise, and Spencer is too. And shit, I think Spencer's probably read more of the books than either of us. But The Witcher is not. He's not supposed to be that jacked. It's like Henry Cavill's like, okay, so I'm playing a guy with a sword, so I got to be big as fuck, right? And it's like, no, you don't.
100% understand. Bigger than Superman.
They're like, no, it's not necessary.
It's more like when you look at like D&D characters, he's built more like a ranger, like slender, fast,
yes.
like muscular, but not huge. And like you said, Caval's like, no, I think of this as like a
like Conan,
He-Man.
Yeah.
It's like so you say this character is very agile. He does a lot of flipping around, so he must have huge calf muscles.
But yeah, that's like they had to redo his armor for the new season because he's so big.
Kept ripping off of him.
Yeah.
He would flex and it would just fall off.
Like, and that's not even a joke. That's
real. But yeah, we're getting that's in a week or two. Yeah, we're getting the new season. But all right, anything else with Wheel of Time?
Nope.
I feel like Child Vander's alive, and that's all I have to say. You know, I feel like that character's alive. He's the only, like, you didn't see him get mauled by a wolf. You know, you saw the wolves come in. Well, you didn't see a wolf kill him. You know, so I feel like that character's alive, and like he's going to be trouble for them in the future.
We shall find out. And was there 9 episodes or 10? Couldn't remember if it was an odd number.
I think it was 10.
Yeah, hopefully it's 10. But yeah, either way, 4 or 5 more episodes, and
It's
we'll
9.
be covering. It's 9.
Season 2.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was an odd number. But yeah, so 4 more weeks, and see how they wrap this up. Appreciate everyone listening, and we will see y'all next time.
Bye.